Welcome back to Klepper's Corner, Today in History. Today we explore March 23rd, a date that repeatedly reminds humanity that if you give people enough time, they will absolutely find new ways to fight each other, invent things to fight each other more efficiently, then form committees to discuss why fighting keeps happening, and finally, invent elevators so we can fight each other in taller buildings. March 23rd is a day where revolutions ignite, empires reorganize, dictators consolidate power, and occasionally somebody invents something that allows us to argue on the internet from slightly more comfortable seating positions. It is a date that proves history does not repeat itself, but it absolutely plagiarizes heavily and changes just enough words to avoid detection. If you zoom out, the themes become impossible to miss. Power gets concentrated. People resist that concentration of power. New technologies promise liberation, but often deliver new anxieties. And every generation believes it has finally invented chaos in a completely original way, before discovering that ancient Rome already did a beta version with worse plumbing. Segment 1, Religion, War, and Power before Wi-Fi. Long before Twitter arguments replaced religious wars, March 23rd was already doing the heavy lifting of combining faith and violence into one convenient historical bundle. In ancient Rome, March 23rd marked the Tubilustrium, a religious ceremony where sacred trumpets were purified to ensure the Roman army could properly announce its intentions to invade neighboring territories with maximum divine approval. Because nothing says spiritual enlightenment like blessing the instruments used to coordinate military conquest. The Romans did not simply wage war. They gave war a liturgical calendar, which is essentially the ancient equivalent of scheduling imperialism in Outlook. Meanwhile, in 625 CE, the Battle of Uhud reminded early Islamic leaders that even when you are morally convinced you are right, somebody forgetting to stay at their assigned hill can still ruin your entire afternoon. Entire theological doctrines emerge from the realization that discipline is not just a suggestion. History often pivots not on massive philosophical debates, but on somebody saying, wait, weren't you supposed to stay over there? Fast forward to 1400, and Vietnamese reformer Ho Quy Ly decided the best way to modernize government was to overthrow the existing dynasty, introduce paper currency, restructure the military, and basically invent the medieval version of disruptive startup culture. Except instead of venture capitalists getting upset, invading armies ended the business model entirely. Reformers throughout history share a common problem. The future sounds great until the past organizes a counterattack. Segment 2, Kings, Revolutions, and the Original Cancel Culture. March 23rd also shows us that being an absolute monarch was basically the original high-risk employment sector. In 1801, Tsar Paul I of Russia discovered that alienating your military leadership is not great for job security, especially when they arrive in your bedroom with a scarf and an aggressive performance review. Nothing clarifies the fragility of absolute power quite like being strangled by the very system designed to protect you. Autocracy looks stable right up until the moment insiders decide stability is overrated. Earlier in 1775, Patrick Henry delivered his famous speech declaring, "Give me liberty or give me death," which is the historical equivalent of rage quitting the British Empire before rage quitting was a feature of online gaming. The speech helped push colonial leaders toward armed resistance, demonstrating that sometimes the most dangerous weapon in history is not artillery, but a sentence delivered at exactly the right moment to people already leaning toward rebellion. Meanwhile, the term okay was born in 1839 as a sarcastic joke spelling of all correct, proving that even in the 1800s, people were already shortening words. Because apparently, typing the full phrase was too exhausting before electricity even existed. Language evolved the way all culture evolves, accidentally, ironically, and often because someone was trying to be funny at the time. Segment 3, Industrial Innovation and the Rise of Tall Problems. March 23rd also helped create the modern world, mostly by giving humans tools to complicate life more efficiently. In 1857, Elisha Otis introduced the safety elevator, finally allowing buildings to grow vertically, which in turn allowed rent prices to grow vertically, which then allowed existential dread to grow vertically. Before the elevator, urban planners were limited by stairs. After the elevator, urban planners were limited only by ambition and zoning disputes. The Wright brothers filed a patent for their flying machine in 1903, marking the moment humans decided walking was too slow and gravity was merely a suggestion. Within decades, humanity progressed from fragile wooden aircraft to the ability to deliver mail, tourists, and unfortunately, bombs across continents. Technology always arrives as a miracle and then quickly becomes infrastructure, followed shortly by inconvenience. Around the same time, the English Football League began organizing professional soccer in 1888, proving that even in the middle of rapid industrial transformation, society still made time to argue passionately about sports outcomes that emotionally affect millions of people who have absolutely no control over the result. Industrialization did not eliminate tribalism. It simply gave it jerseys and ticket prices. Segment 4. Dictators, democracies, and extremely bad legislative decisions. On March 23, 1933, Germany passed the Enabling Act, granting Adolf Hitler the authority to rule by decree, effectively transforming democracy into a very short-lived, limited-time offer. The law passed under intimidation, propaganda, and the political equivalent of a very aggressive group chat where dissenting members mysteriously lose their ability to participate. It stands as one of history's clearest reminders that democratic systems do not usually collapse in dramatic explosions, but in procedural votes conducted under pressure, fear, and the illusion of legality. Meanwhile, in 1940, the Lahore Resolution laid the ideological groundwork for the creation of Pakistan, demonstrating how national identities often emerge from political compromise, cultural division, and the universal human tradition of drawing lines on maps and insisting those lines are extremely important. The creation of new states rarely solves every underlying tension, but it does create new flags, new anthems, and new disagreements about where the borders should actually be. Segment 5. Cold War anxiety and space lasers that sound suspiciously like science fiction. March 23rd, during the Cold War, reminds us that humanity once collectively decided the best way to avoid nuclear war was to invent even more complicated nuclear technology. In 1983, Ronald Reagan proposed the Strategic Defense Initiative, nicknamed Star Wars, because apparently, if your geopolitical policy sounds like a blockbuster movie, people assume it is either visionary or wildly unrealistic. The idea was to intercept nuclear missiles using space-based defense systems, which sounds reassuring until you realize both sides were basically saying, what if we make the apocalypse slightly more high-tech? The Cold War often felt like two superpowers competing to see who could invent the most creative way to prevent catastrophe, while simultaneously making catastrophe more technologically impressive. At the same time, liberation struggles across the world demonstrated that ideological conflict was not limited to superpowers. In Angola, the Battle of Quito Cuanavale helped shift the balance of power in southern Africa and contributed to the weakening of apartheid-era dominance. Even regional conflicts carried global consequences, reminding the world that the Cold War was not only fought in speeches and summits, but in real places where real people paid the cost of ideological competition. Segment 6. Modern chaos, global systems, and the world's most expensive traffic jam. March 23rd continues delivering chaos in the modern era, including the 2021 moment when the cargo ship Ever Given became diagonally stuck in the Suez Canal, temporarily blocking one of the most important shipping routes on Earth because one very large boat decided to parallel park aggressively. Billions of dollars in global trade paused because somewhere somebody said, maybe turn a little more to the left. No, the other left. Meanwhile, in 2001, the Russian space station Mir was deliberately deorbited after years of service, proving that even space stations eventually reach the point where maintenance costs exceed sentimental value. Mir symbolized both the ambition of the space age and the financial realities that follow every ambitious project, once the initial excitement fades and the repair bills arrive. And in 2020, the United Kingdom entered its first COVID lockdown, reminding humanity that even in an age of advanced medicine and instant communication, we are still occasionally defeated by microscopic organisms that do not even have Twitter accounts. The modern world prides itself on interconnection, yet that interconnection often means disruptions cascade faster than solutions. In conclusion, March 23rd reveals a consistent pattern across history. Humans build systems of power. Those systems inevitably get challenged, occasionally overthrown, frequently rebranded, and almost always replaced with something equally complicated. From sacred Roman war trumpets to space lasers, from revolutionary speeches to ships stuck sideways. History continues to demonstrate that technological progress does not necessarily reduce chaos. It simply makes chaos more efficient, more global, and significantly easier to live stream. The deeper lesson of March 23rd may be that history's greatest constant is not conflict or innovation, but the persistent belief that this time, finally, we have everything under control right before something extremely preventable goes spectacularly wrong.